What's going on, everybody? So, 28 years later is actually happening in just a couple days. After years of rumors, delays, and fans wondering if we'd ever get a follow-up to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, the third entry is finally on its way. And yeah, on the surface, it's exciting. The idea of going back to that rage-infected world with Danny Boyle possibly returning sounds like the perfect comeback for a horror franchise that helped redefine the genre. But as much as I want this movie to be great, I've got some concerns. Big ones. Because for every reason to be excited, there's a potential red flag. So today, I'm breaking down 5 reasons why 28 years later could suck. Hopefully it doesn't. But let's talk about why it might. First off, it might try way too hard to be epic. One of the reasons 28 Days Later worked so well was because of how stripped down and grounded it was. It felt like you were dropped into a real-world nightmare, quiet streets, isolated survivors, raw fear. But now that we're talking about a potential trilogy and a major studio pushing this out with high expectations, there's a very real risk they'll try to scale it up into some massive, world-saving blockbuster. And that's not what this franchise is supposed to be. If they load it up with big set pieces, global politics, or massive CGI destruction just to make it feel bigger, they could lose the gritty atmosphere that made the original so haunting. Not every movie needs to be a spectacle, especially not this one. Then there's the nostalgia problem. Look, I love callbacks when they're used well. But if 28 years later leans too heavily on the past, like constantly referencing old characters, recreating scenes from the first movie, or name-dropping moments just for cheap applause, it's going to feel hollow. That kind of stuff only works when there's a strong story underneath it. If it's just, hey, remember Jim? Remember the hospital scene? Remember the music? Without doing anything new, then we're in legacy sequel territory. And not the good kind. It can't just ride on the coattails of the originals. It needs to earn its place as a sequel. Another big concern is tone. Now, Danny Boyle returning sounds promising, but we've seen this kind of thing go sideways before. 28 Weeks Later, for example, had some great moments but also really struggled with consistency. It went from emotional family drama to explosive action horror in the span of minutes, and not always in a smooth way. If 28 years later can't lock into a clear tone, whether it's intimate horror, bleak drama, or full-throttle survival, it could end up feeling all over the place. And when you're dealing with such a heavy subject like a society-destroying infection, that kind of tonal whiplash can kill the tension. This franchise needs a strong, focused vision more than ever. And then we have character development. This is huge. What made 28 Days Later work wasn't just the infected, it was the characters. Jim, Selena, Hannah, you cared about them. Their journey mattered. If 28 years later introduces a brand new cast but doesn't give them depth, or worse, brings back legacy characters just to kill them off for shock value, it's going to lose the emotional weight that defined the originals. Horror without heart gets boring fast. We need people we care about, people we want to survive, people who feel real. If that's missing, then no amount of atmosphere or action is going to save it. And finally, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The zombie genre is just oversaturated. Yeah, I know they're not technically zombies in this franchise, they're infected, but to most people, it's the same deal. And let's be honest, between shows like The Walking Dead, countless movies, spin-offs, games, comedies, and crossovers, we've seen a lot of this. So if 28 years later doesn't bring something fresh to the table, whether that's a new angle on the infection, a twist on survival, or a bold narrative choice, it's going to get lost in the noise. It can't just be another fast zombie movie. It has to evolve. So yeah, those are my 5 biggest concerns going into 28 years later. I want this movie to succeed. I really do. I love the original. I respect the tone. I admire what Boyle and Garland built. But in a world of sequels, reboots, and cinematic universes, it's so easy to get lost chasing trends instead of sticking to what made something special in the first place. Hopefully, 28 years later avoids these traps. Hopefully, it gives us something brutal, emotional, and unforgettable. But until then, I'm cautiously optimistic and maybe just a little worried. Let me know in the comments, are you excited for 28 years later? Or do you think it's arriving a little too late? If you liked the video, drop a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives, horror breakdowns, and everything in between. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.